Hi, you're watching Hindustan Times, and I am Aditi Prasad. As the COVID 19 pandemic rages, there is one word on everyone's lips, and that is the vaccine. And right now, several vaccines are in the works. But how will we know which is the right vaccine? How effective will that vaccine be when it comes? Will there be enough vaccine for each one of us? These are some questions that everybody is asking, everybody is thinking. I have with me Dr. Gagandeep Kang, one of the most eminent microbiologists in India, and professor at the Christian Medical College in Vellore. She is credited with pioneering work on the indigenous rotavirus vaccine and is the first Indian scientist to be elected Fellow of the Royal Society. Hi, ma'am. Welcome to Hindustan Times. And I'm sure our viewers have a lot of questions today, and I'm sure they'll keep writing in while we are talking. But first and foremost, the question that everybody wants to know, where is the vaccine?
In development. There are now 320 plus vaccine projects and about 50 vaccines that are in clinical trials, over a dozen of which are in phase 3 trials. And phase 3 is the stage that tells us whether the vaccine is really working or not. Once we have results from the phase 3 trials, we will have the first information that tells us whether these vaccines work or not. So far, the information that we have is that these vaccines are safe in small numbers. They are immunogenic, they induce an immune response. But at this time, even though people tell us that vaccines are working well, what they mean by saying they are working well until now is to say that they are inducing an immune response, not that they are protecting us from disease. That is the information that we will get from the large scale phase 3 studies that involve tens of thousands of people around the world.
So, ma'am, what I hear you saying is that the vaccine is in the works, and that there are clinical trials going on everywhere. We keep reading about that every day. How soon can we hope for one, two, three, some vaccines to see the light of the day? What is the earliest that you would, if you were a crystal gazing person, how soon would you predict that a vaccine would be in our hands or be with us?
I think we will have what are called interim results from one or two vaccines this year for sure. So I think the Pfizer vaccine will give us some results. It's possible that we may also get results from the AstraZeneca vaccine. But getting interim results just tells us that the vaccine is working reasonably well. It doesn't mean that the trials don't stop. They will continue. Follow up of people in the trials will continue. But getting positive results on an interim analysis will allow the vaccine companies to then approach their regulators and ask for permission to use these vaccines more widely. Depending on the country in which the regulators are located, the company could ask for an accelerated licensure. They could ask for an emergency use authorization, or they could ask for a conditional approval, all of which would allow the vaccines to be used on a much wider scale. Once the regulators give that, the WHO could give an emergency use listing, which would then allow the vaccines to be used in many more countries based on the WHO recommendation. Now, given we have, let's say, a positive interim analysis by the end of the year, the companies could go directly to the regulators. You could be looking at having a conditional approval or an EUA by the end of the year, early next year. That still doesn't mean that everybody's going to have vaccine. It means that we will then start to see a trickle of doses coming in the parts of the world where the regulators are located. Then we get the WHO approval, and then the vaccines start to move to many countries. So what we are looking at is small numbers, very, very optimistically in the first quarter of next year, more likely second quarter of next year. And the numbers then will start increasing as more and more vaccines get their results. And hopefully, we will have companies that have lots of doses ready for them.
Right. So what I hear you saying, ma'am, is that there will be at first interim vaccines, which are probably not going to be as effective. Is that what you're saying? And then the clinical trials are continue, and they're going to. Yes, please.
No, the vaccine is the same. People don't make, half good vaccine and then convert that into a good vaccine. It is
Hmm.
an interim analysis of the data that will be done. So usually the trial has a size that gives you a great deal of confidence in the results. And in the trials that have been set up, what is being done is that they're recruiting between 30, 45, 60,000 people, about whom half or two-thirds are getting the vaccine and the others are getting a placebo. Now, the
Okay.
people making the vaccine don't know who has got what. Now we will start to count the number of cases of COVID 19 that happen in this group, still not knowing which one got the vaccine, which one didn't. Once you reach a certain number of cases, you can look at the data. And if it appears that the vaccinated people have less disease than the people who did not receive the vaccine, then you know the vaccine is working. Now, the problem with an interim analysis is the more the number of cases that you get, the more confident you are in how good your vaccine is. The
Right.
FDA and the WHO have asked for any vaccine to have at least 50% efficacy. So that means the vaccine should be able to prevent 50% of a clinically significant infection with SARS-CoV-2. If
Okay.
you do an interim analysis, then even though you think it might be 50%, your confidence intervals are much larger. You will not have the true result until you finish the entire trial. So, an interim analysis is a signal that things are going well, based on which you go for licensure. But to have absolute confidence in the results, you continue the trial until you achieve the number of cases that you had set out to do. And in most of the trials that have about 30,000 people, the number of cases that we are looking for is 150. But the interim analysis is set for varying numbers starting from about half of that.
So the effectiveness of each of these vaccines is going to be varying at some level.
Every
Sorry, I'm
vaccine,
I'm a yeah. I'm a
every
non-medical
vaccine,
person, so I'm just trying to understand what you're saying.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, if a vaccine prevents half of all disease, it's 50% efficacious. If it prevents three quarters of all disease, it's 75% efficacious. But when I say 50%, it doesn't mean that if I give that vaccine to five people or to four people, two of them will be protected from disease and two of them will not. It could be three, it could be one. The 50% is an estimate of how well the vaccine is working, but the real figure is a range around the 50%. And the minimum that these sample sizes have been calculated so that the minimum efficacy, what's called the lower bound of efficacy, is 30%, which means the vaccine must prevent at least one third of all illness if it has a readout that shows that it prevents 50%. It's basically there's a range around 50% from 30 to 70, which might be the true performance of the vaccine.
So from what I understand is that then even if the vaccines come or vaccines come, we will need to continue living the way or living in this new normal, which is interacting virtually, maintaining social distancing, wearing masks for a long time to come then, because till the time you finally figure out one with a better efficacy?
So 50% is the minimum for licensure. We may actually find that the vaccine is 70 or 80% efficacious, but no vaccine that is less than 50% point estimate will be licensed by any licensing authority. That's why having these large numbers of people tested is very, very important. If I did a trial in 1,000 people and I said that the vaccine is 50% efficacious because it prevented disease in half of that 1,000, versus I do this trial in 100,000 people and I find
Right.
that it prevents disease in 50,000. Obviously, we have more confidence when it's 50,000 versus 500 because the numbers allow us to get more precise estimates of how efficacious the vaccine really is. That's why we are doing big trials so that we get results fast and we get results that we can be reasonably sure that we can rely on.
So great. So not very good news for people who are extroverts and are missing going out and talking to people, because if we get a lower efficacy vaccine, we'll really need to continue practicing social distancing and masks, and keep doing all the things that we're doing right now. Is that what you're saying?
To some extent, yes, but the purpose of a vaccine is to provide two things. One is individual level protection, and the other is population protection. So, the individual level protection, if we had a measure that showed us that the vaccine has worked and you have this signature that tells us that you will be protected from disease, this is called a correlate of protection. Right
Okay.
now, we don't have one, but there are efforts that are ongoing to identify this correlate. Once we have a correlate of protection, then you can get tested, see whether you're protected or not, and then go about and do your thing. But to get to that correlate is a while. The other is population level protection, where even a vaccine that has 30% efficacy actually decreases the burden of the public health problem that SARS CoV 2 is. A 30% reduction in disease, and particularly in severe disease, is a massive transformation in the ability of the health system to handle what is happening today. So, we are looking for individual level protection, we are looking for public health uh, answers through vaccination. And I think we will get to both. We just don't know how well the vaccines will work at this time.
All right. Now let me move focus to the second part of my thing. So right now, what you said is that we don't know how well the vaccines will work. So let's not get overtly excited when the government says that by July 2021, we will utilize 400 to 500 million doses and vaccinate about 20 to 25 crore people. So I want to talk about a new study that has just come out. It's been released by the US based Duke Global Health Innovation Center. Now, this global analysis of advanced market commitments for experimental vaccines has says that India has already ordered some 600 million doses by utilizing its manufacturing capabilities, and is now aiming to secure another billion doses of the coronavirus vaccine. Now, that sounds like a great thing because we seem to be pretty covered,
Well,
at least for starting.
if you look at India and India's manufacturing capacity, we have, as you know, the biggest manufacturers in the world. The companies that we have in Pune and in Hyderabad are just incredible in the number of doses of vaccine that they can make every year. So I don't think that we should be worrying because our vaccine manufacturers are looking to make their own vaccines. But wherever in the world there are successful vaccines, those, if people want bulk capacity, if they want to be able to deliver vaccines to the world at an affordable price, I think everyone is going to have India on their radar. Indian companies will be asked, they already have been asked by Novavax, by J&J. The multinationals are coming here and asking our vaccine companies that if our vaccines are successful, will you make them? And if those vaccines are being produced in India, obviously there will be a push to give access to the Indian population for those vaccines. So I think it's really part of the platform that the vaccine companies have built so far, how proactive they've been in seeking out partnerships, that has resulted in a situation where, I think in India we should be reasonably confident that we will have access to vaccines, not just because of the AMC of the government, but even beyond that, well into the future. Aditi, you're on mute.
Sorry. There, I'm sorry. That's the work from home reality that we live in. And my dog suddenly started barking. If you heard him while we were having this conversation, and I couldn't stifle a smile because he normally barks when someone's at the door, and I was waiting for the bell to ring and create another hullabaloo in this entire melee. But anyway, so let me just get back to the vaccine and talk with you about that this announcement that has come from the government that 20 to 25 crore people inoculated by July 2021. There needs I mean I'm sure you've been at the helm of India's vaccine readiness for the longest time, and I'm sure you're still actively involved, even though now you're in Vellore. But can you tell us what is the distribution strategy, or what are the possible distribution strategies for the vaccine that the government could be adopting? Because we've heard all kinds of things from sources. That we've obviously heard that there is a plan to, first inoculate the health workers, the vulnerable populations. But what about? I mean, but there's also there's also uh, uh, sort of a flip side where there's an announcement made in the state of Bihar that all of Bihar will get free vaccines the moment it's available due to political reasons and in election season. So, what is your view on where the government's vaccine distribution strategy is at present?
So, possibly one of the advantages in terms of delivery is going to be that we don't need to vaccinate the entire country on one day. The supply of vaccines itself will be limiting. So, we will need to have phases in which the vaccine is distributed. The WHO has been preparing a prioritization framework to decide who gets allocated the vaccine first, then who gets it next, so on and so forth. And the COVAX facility, which is part of the Access to COVID 19 Tools Accelerator, which contains COVAX that India has signed up for, has articulated this strategy quite clearly a few months ago. And what we are hearing in the press reflects that, where healthcare workers get the vaccine first because they are putting themselves at greater risk because of their occupation. They are more likely to be infected and they are required to look after patients. So, every level of healthcare worker, and then after that, look at the elderly, people with comorbidities. Within COVAX, the idea is that every country that is signed up for COVAX will get about 20% of their population covered with vaccine. The first 3% is the healthcare workers, and the next 70%, 17% is the elderly and people with comorbidities. And then after that, there's a plan for the next 30%, and then the final 50%, if that vaccine is available through COVAX, or if countries get it on their own. So the government's announcements so far seem to reflect that same prioritization, and it's good to see that. In terms of distribution, we already have the largest vaccination program in the world. And with polio, we have been able to reach all children under 5 for about 15 years, at least twice a year. Now, that's a pretty humongous exercise, but it's important to remember that polio is an oral vaccine, and here we are talking about an injectable vaccine.
Right.
So, even though the delivery and the logistics and the storage for polio will be similar to what is done for an injectable vaccine, in terms of manpower, in terms of facilities, in terms of monitoring safety immediately after giving the vaccine, we will need something that is different from polio to be able to deliver this vaccine in campaign mode. Additionally, we are now reaching a population which is the elderly and healthcare workers. So we have to think about workplace immunization, going to hospitals and immunizing people there. And if it is the elderly, you're going to have to set up vaccination stations and have them come to the vaccination center. And if they can't come there, then you're going to have to reach the vaccine to them. So, this kind of very detailed planning called micro planning has been done by the polio program, and now states are doing that as well. In terms of vaccine being free, uh, the state that I'm in, Tamil Nadu, has also promised that everyone will get free vaccine, and we don't have an election around the corner. I think the government giving vaccine for free to everybody is what should be done. But maybe one strategy is to say that if you can afford to pay for it, do pay for it. Not mandating that if you're, let's say, above poverty line, you do
Mm.
have to pay for the vaccine. So we'll have to figure that out. And I think in the first instance, vaccine should be free and given to priority groups.
Right. I just want to come back and touch upon the global study which sort of analyzed the pre-ordering of vaccines. Now, India has pre-ordered 600 million doses. And they're probably trying to secure another billion. We said, according to the study, and then the study also, of course, India is second only to the United States as far as pre-ordering of vaccines is concerned. Now, the United States, of course, being a rich country, India being a country where vaccine can be manufactured. But do you think, so there's a lot of criticism coming from WHO and other stakeholders that, uh, uh, not criticism, really concern that richer countries and many mid-income countries like India, which have vaccine production capacity, are pre-ordering the bulk of vaccines. So fewer vaccines will be available to the poorer nations or the low-income nations. I know there are no easy answers, but where do you stand on this argument?
So I think we need to be good global citizens. So when we think about prioritization, the prioritization should not depend on where you live and how much you can pay. So even though countries are pre-ordering vaccines, in India, this is only for 30% of the population, a little less than 30% of the population. And we don't know with all of the pre-orders whether these will be successful vaccines and the supply will really be what we think it's going to be. I think if it does turn out that all of the vaccines are successful and these doses become available, then it's a question of the timing of doses. You might have paid for them, but you might be willing to wait to get doses of the vaccine until other places that have priority populations that have not been immunized receive that vaccine.
All right. All right, ma'am, and of course, I just want to, end by, irrespective of the hoarding, when do you think there'll be enough vaccines to cover the world's population. I mean, if that's even a area that you want to go into.
I think a lot depends on how frequently we will need to immunize, which are the one dose vaccines, the two dose vaccines, the three dose vaccines, and how long does protection last. I think somewhere between the end of 2022, we will have a reasonable supply. And I think reaching the world's population, or as many as we hope to immunize, will be more towards the end of 2023, 2024. So a lot will depend on how many candidates are successful and which are the platforms on which these vaccines are being made.
Thank you so much for joining us today. But before I go, I have one last question which I really want to put to you. A lot of people are talking about how predictable this, that the virus is behaving so far, pretty predictably. But as I said, again, no medical training. But what is perhaps the most unpredictable thing about this particular virus, according to you?
To me, the most unpredictable thing is who has severe disease and who does not. We have no way of having prior information that if a young person or an elderly person is infected, who will do well and who will do badly. We have a broad picture. Younger people do well, older people do badly. But at the individual level, we have no understanding of which way it's going to go when a person is acutely infected.
Wow, that's a lot of uncertainties right out there, because that is, at the stage of treating, how do you treat a person if you don't know which way the virus is going to impact him or her? Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for joining us today. I have another list of questions, but I told you that I'm not going to take your time more than 25 to 30 minutes. So I'm going to end it there and hope that you can join us again soon in the near future for another session in which you can educate our viewers about the vaccine, about steps to take, preventive care till the vaccine comes, and even once the vaccine is there, what are the things that they need to keep doing in order to keep escaping the wrath of the coronavirus, so to speak. Thank you so much for viewers for watching this. Thank you, Dr.
Thank
Khan,
you,
for joining
Aditi.
us. Thank you. We look forward to coming again and seeing you soon.